A young girl pulled at Karoline's sleeve, gestured toward her cross necklace, and posed a question that was both simple and profoundly moving, causing tears to well up in her eyes. The community center in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee thrummed with energy. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries wafted through the air, intertwining with the lively conversations of townsfolk who had come together for the evening's meet and greet. It was a setting where neighbors recognized one another by name, where the pace of life eased just enough for genuine connections to flourish. Karoline Leavitt positioned herself beside a folding table laden with pamphlets, her smile warm as she engaged in handshakes and responded to inquiries. She had always found pleasure in gatherings like these, not for the spotlight, but for the dialogues. The genuine, raw narratives that individuals confided in her. The serene instances of truth that brought back to her mind the reasons behind her actions. While engaging in conversation with an older woman regarding local schools, she sensed a gentle pull at her sleeve. Initially, she dismissed it, but the pull returned once more. Tenacious, diminutive. She pivoted, casting her gaze downward. A young girl stood there, just shy of 7, her chestnut curls framing her round, freckled face. She grasped the edge of her floral dress tightly. Her expansive brown eyes fixated on Karoline's necklace. Karoline knelt, bringing herself down to the child's eye level. "Greetings," she murmured gently, presenting a friendly smile. "May I ask what your name is?" The girl paused for a moment, then responded in a soft voice. "Samantha. It's a pleasure to meet you, Samantha." The child's eyes remained steadfast. Instead, she directed a small, slightly trembling finger toward the delicate gold cross that lay against Karoline's collarbone. "What is the significance of your necklace?" The atmosphere in the room remained alive with a subtle hum, never truly falling into silence. Yet for Karoline, the atmosphere transformed. The inquiry was straightforward, pure-hearted. And yet it bore a significance she hadn't anticipated. For years, that cross had lingered against her skin, near her heart. It was more than mere adornment. It served as a reminder, a symbol of something greater than her own existence. For the first time in ages, someone was seeking her insight on the matter. She parted her lips to respond, yet silence enveloped her. Instead, her thoughts wandered to a night she had spent years attempting to erase from her memory. Yet certain memories linger regardless of how fervently you desire their departure. Karoline paused, her gaze fixed on the little girl as she knelt there. Yet her thoughts drifted to a time long gone, to a moment that had molded her in ways she could never have foreseen. At 19, she was a freshman at Belmont University in Nashville, filled with anticipation for what lay ahead, yet grappling with challenges that she kept hidden. In those days, she was juggling classes, 2 part-time jobs, and the persistent sense that she fell short, that she was an outsider. Her upbringing was steeped in belief, instilled by her parents from a young age. Yet during the chapter of her existence, it seemed far away. She followed the routine, attending Sunday services, offering quiet prayers before sleep. Yet it all seemed devoid of substance, as if her words echoed in a vacant space. Then the call arrived. Just past midnight, the dorm room was softly illuminated by the gentle glow of her laptop screen. As she immersed herself in her studies for the upcoming exam, the sudden vibration of her phone interrupted her focus. She hesitated, yet an inner voice urged her to respond. As soon as her mother's voice reached her ears, understanding washed over her. Her grandmother, the one who had shown her the art of baking biscuits from scratch, who always carried the scent of lavender and spoke of faith as if it were as tangible as the earth beneath them, was no longer there. An unexpected heart attack. Without any prior notice. There's no farewell. Karoline struggled to recall the events of the next few hours. All she could remember were the soft, muffled cries of her roommate in the distance, the chilling emptiness that settled in her chest, and the heavy burden of understanding that she would never again hear her grandmother's voice. In that moment, she experienced a profound sense of solitude like never before. The following morning, she mechanically packed a bag and secured a bus ticket for her journey home. Yet her hands seemed to drift away from her body, as if she were a spectator in her own existence. Upon her arrival at the house of her youth, an unsettling sense enveloped her. The chair belonging to her grandmother remained unoccupied. The atmosphere was dense, laden with unspoken words. That night, restless and wide awake, she found herself drifting into her grandmother's bedroom. The aroma of lavender remained, enveloping the blankets and pillows. A solitary item on the nightstand drew her attention. A fine gold chain, elegant in its simplicity. The cross pendant lies gently upon the aged pages of a Bible. That necklace had been a constant companion for her grandmother throughout her entire life. Karoline lifted it, her fingers gliding over the smooth, cool surface of the metal. Something about it made her pause completely. The sensation of it resting in her hand was unlike anything she had experienced before. It felt like it transcended mere adornment, embodying something deeper. It was a concept she wasn't prepared to grasp just yet. Yet, there are moments when belief arrives unexpectedly, catching you off guard. Karoline lingered in the muted glow of her grandmother's bedroom, gripping the cross necklace with such intensity that its edges dug into her palm. She anticipated a sense of solace, yet what washed over her was a tide of fury. How could the divine take someone like her grandmother, so brimming with love and unwavering in her faith, and leave Karoline here, overwhelmed by questions she couldn't find the answers to? She had listened to others speak of discovering tranquility amidst sorrow, on having faith that every occurrence has its purpose. Yet in that moment everything felt utterly incomprehensible. She draped the chain around her neck, allowing the pendant to settle gently against her chest. Initially it felt frigid and strange. Then, as if the burden of it all became unbearable, she succumbed to her emotions. Tears streamed down her face, trembling through her whole being as she collapsed onto the bed. It was not a subtle, composed display of tears. It was a grief that tore through you, leaving you exposed, gasping for air. She nestled into herself, resting her forehead against the soft fabric of her grandmother's quilt, the lingering scent of lavender enveloping her. Uncertain of the time that had passed, she found herself whispering, perhaps to herself, perhaps to a higher power, if such a presence was indeed attentive. If you exist, if you truly are out there, I must know, I must experience something, anything at all. At this moment I am experiencing a complete absence of emotion. The stillness that ensued was overwhelming. There was no divine proclamation, no unexpected wave of comfort or understanding, only the faint chorus of crickets serenading the night and the sporadic groan of the aging structure as it found its place in the stillness. She ought to have felt foolish. She ought to have risen, cleared her face, and reminded herself to press forward. Yet she chose not to. Instead, she lingered there, anticipating. And then an event unfolded. It wasn't a sound or an image, not the sort of thing you find in tales. It was a subtle change, slight yet undeniable. Her heart, which had seemed to be ripping itself apart just moments ago, began to slow. The pressure in her chest remained, yet it eased ever so slightly. Her breathing, once ragged and uneven, began to steady. And somewhere deep within, where only she could sense it, a gentle warmth nestled into the coldest corners of her being. That wasn't a response. It was not a resolution. Yet it held significance. For the first time since she had dialed that number that night, she felt a sense of buoyancy returning. She grasped the cross necklace, letting it slip through her fingers as she gazed at it, her vision clouded by tears. It had once been her grandmother's, yet in that instant it seemed as though it had chosen her instead. She was uncertain about what would follow. She was uncertain if her belief would ever return to the simplicity and ease it once held in her childhood, a time of unwavering trust. Yet she was certain of one thing. She had company. And that was sufficient to persevere. Faith is not merely a fleeting instant. It's an adventure. At times, the most challenging aspect is moving forward. The days following her grandmother's passing were like wading through thick water, sluggish, burdensome, and filled with doubt. Karoline moved through the crowd, her lips curving into faint smiles for the relatives who gently patted her shoulder, her head nodding in response to condolences that melded into a haze. Yet, there was a distinct change in the air. She remained filled with questions, still experiencing that deep ache in her chest when contemplating the irrevocability of it all. Yet each time she touched the fragile cross lying against her collarbone, a sense of calm washed over her. She arrived back in Belmont a week later, disembarking from the bus with a heart that was mending, yet still bore the marks of its previous fractures. She had anticipated the loneliness to engulf her once more. But instead, there was something different, a subtle resilience. One evening, roughly a month later, Karoline found herself in the student lounge, idly turning the pages of a textbook, her mind elsewhere. A fellow student named Brandon, whom she hardly recognized beyond their mutual classes, sat opposite her, his eyes rimmed with red and looking empty. "Are you all right?" she inquired. Initially, he remained silent. Then, taking a shaky breath, he whispered, "My dad died last night." Karoline stood still. She ought to have expressed, "I'm truly sorry," or "That sounds incredibly difficult." Yet those words seemed insubstantial, as if they could easily slip through the fissures of his sorrow and vanish. Instead, she grasped her necklace, caressing the pendant with her fingers, as she had done countless times since that night in her grandmother's bedroom. Last month, She shared the news of her grandmother's passing. Words escape me in moments like this, yet I understand the weight of believing that nothing will ever align again. Brandon gulped, his jaw tightening as he blinked quickly. Absolutely. With a moment of uncertainty, she removed the necklace and extended it toward him, his brow furrowing in confusion. I simply cannot accept that. You're not accepting it, she murmured gently, simply taking it for a moment, until you sense the air filling your lungs once more. He remained silent initially, simply gazing at her as if she had presented him with something far more significant than mere jewelry. With trembling hands, he grasped it. Karoline was unaware at that time, but that instant, that simple gesture of goodwill, would mark the beginning of countless others. Sometimes, belief isn't about possessing all the solutions. At times, it's simply about being present when another is too adrift to navigate their own path. Yet, belief has a tendency to return when you least anticipate it. Karoline's voice took on a gentle quality as she grounded herself in the moment, focusing on the little girl before her, who stood wide-eyed and silent. She could still sense the gravity of that moment from years past, when she relinquished something that had once served as her anchor, with the hope that it would assist another in staying afloat. She looked down at the fragile cross hanging from her neck now, the one she had purchased to take the place of the one she had given away. Yet that initial necklace, the one that had once belonged to her grandmother, never returned to her possession. Brandon had held onto it. A year after she had entrusted it to him, he informed her that he wasn't prepared to return it just yet. She simply smiled and said, "Then it's yours." Years later, she found herself facing a question from a little girl, completely unaware of how profoundly that small piece of gold had influenced her journey. Karoline inhaled deeply. "My grandmother gifted me a necklace just like this," she said, her fingers lightly brushing against the cross. "Initially, I perceived it merely as adornment, a beautiful accessory to don. However, following her passing, I came to understand that it encompassed something far more significant than I had initially perceived. It brought to mind that even in moments of solitude, I was never truly alone." The young girl's gaze sparkled with a familiarity that Karoline instantly recognized. A serene comprehension, a wisdom that belies her age. The girl whispered, "My mom used to wear one." Her delicate fingers grazed her neck, finding only the smoothness of bare skin. She was compelled to part with it. She mentioned that our priority should be food over jewelry. Karoline felt a constriction in her chest. She felt no need to inquire about the girl's mother. The answer was palpable in the quiver of the child's voice. She acted without a moment's pause. With deliberate grace, she extended her fingers to the nape of her neck, releasing the clasp of the chain. The young girl's eyes sparkled with wonder as Karoline grasped her hand and delicately set the necklace into her palm. "It's yours now," Karoline said softly. The girl gazed at the cross, her lip quivering. "However, I am unable to do so." "Indeed, you can," Karoline interjected with a warm smile. "And each time you put it on, I hope it reminds you that, regardless of the circumstances, you are always accompanied." The young girl's delicate fingers grasped the necklace tightly, her eyes brimming with tears. A soft whimper slipped from her lips as she propelled herself forward, encircling Karoline's neck with her delicate arms. Karoline embraced her tightly, sensing the girl's delicate body tremble against her. In the distance, the whispers of the crowd had faded into silence. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy, laden with an unarticulated tension, a sense of reverence hanging in the air. Yet, there are times when the most impactful experiences require no language whatsoever. The young girl clung to Karoline as if time itself had come to a standstill. As she finally drew back, she brushed her wet cheeks with the back of her hand, her fingers remaining curled possessively around the necklace. Karoline observed the emotions dancing across her youthful visage. A sense of thankfulness mingled with astonishment, an unarticulated feeling that only a young soul, burdened by experiences beyond their years, could truly grasp. A woman emerged from the throng, her hands quivering ever so slightly. Karoline was aware even before she uttered a word. The mother of the girl stood there. I don't know what to say," the woman whispered, her voice heavy with feeling. Her eyes, tired yet gentle, shifted between Karoline and her daughter. Every night before bed, she shares her thoughts on that necklace. The one I was compelled to part with. I never imagined she would have another one. Karoline offered a soft smile. At this moment, she certainly does. The mother took a deep breath, her lips sealing tightly as she released a trembling sigh. Thank you, she murmured softly. This holds greater significance than you realize. Yet Karoline understood perfectly what it signified, for she had previously experienced that very moment. The one where she was on the receiving end of something that resembled hope, especially when hope was the most elusive thing to grasp. The once motionless crowd, enveloped in silence, started to stir. Some individuals dabbed at their eyes, while others shared subtle looks of understanding. A handful of older women placed their hands over their hearts, nodding knowingly as if they grasped a shared understanding that required no words. Suddenly, an unforeseen event unfolded. A figure in the rear moved to the forefront. He stood tall, his attire showing signs of wear, his hands rough and calloused from years of hard labor. He delved into his pocket, retrieved a modest bundle of cash, and tenderly placed it in the mother's palm. He stated it plainly for groceries. The mother inhaled sharply, her head shaking in disbelief. Oh, I simply can't. Please, he interrupted, his tone calm yet gentle. It's not about charity, it's simply the appropriate course of action. And in an instant, the floodgates burst forth. A different individual came forward, presenting a gift card for a nearby grocery store. Another woman removed a delicate bracelet from her wrist and offered it to the little girl, softly saying, "Something lovely to complement your necklace." One by one, warmth spread through the room, each individual offering what they could, subtle, gentle actions that might have appeared insignificant alone, but collectively, they transformed into something profound. Karoline stepped back, observing as unfamiliar figures transformed into more than mere faces in a sea of people. This was no longer about her. It had never been that way. It revolved around a grander theme, one that had begun with an innocent inquiry from a young girl. At times, faith transcends mere belief. At times, it's all about taking decisive steps. Yet, the most impactful moments are not merely spontaneous. They depart, yet a trace remains, a presence that endures well beyond the fleeting instant. As the crowd gradually thinned, Karoline lingered for a moment, observing the little girl holding the necklace close to her heart. The mother grasped her daughter's hand, her eyes glistening with unfallen tears, murmuring words meant solely for their ears. The exchange was subtle, almost lost in the soft whispers that filled the room, yet Karoline understood that this moment would linger in their memories for all time. And if she were truthful, it would linger with her as well. She entered the community center with the anticipation of a simple handshake, a handful of conversations, and perhaps a smattering of polite applause. Rather, it brought to mind a lesson she had absorbed long ago. Even the tiniest instances can carry profound significance. The little girl was unaware, yet she had bestowed upon Karoline something equally significant in exchange. She had reminded her of the significance of faith, of the value of kindness, particularly the kind that sought nothing in return, which held immeasurable worth. She had once believed that faith meant possessing all the answers. That evening in her grandmother's room, she pleaded for a single, unmistakable sign. Yet, as the years passed, a realization began to dawn on her. Belief isn't rooted in certainty, it's grounded in faith. Believing that even in the toughest times, even when solutions seem elusive, there remains a glimmer of hope to discover. At times, that illumination manifests as a tiny hand grasping at your sleeve. Karoline breathed out, a surprising warmth enveloping her heart. She began to walk away, but just as she was about to move, she sensed another pull on her sleeve. The young girl gazed up at her once more, her fingers still wrapped around the cross. "Excuse me, Miss Karoline?" she inquired gently. Karoline lowered herself once again. "Indeed, darling?" The girl paused for a moment, then replied, "I believe my mom is correct. You bestowed upon me something far greater than a mere necklace.